Hi y'all, in this video let's talk a little bit about Berkeley and Ann Coulter and what happened there this week. And if you don't know anything about the story, get off YouTube and go look at some news and then come back. But anyway, Ann Coulter was supposed to give a speech there this Thursday, but the administration at Berkeley was doing like the administration at many other colleges with respect to conservative voices, trying to make them jump through all kinds of extra hoops in order to even have the pretense of saying, oh yeah, we're trying to accommodate them, but we just have special conditions we're going to impose on them. And then when they meet all the conditions, Ann Coulter's advice to Young America's Foundation and college Republicans was, whatever they say, just agree to it. I want to give the speech on that campus. Just, you know, this goofy, it has to be between 1 and 3, unlike all the other speakers, agree to it. It has to be this other place off campus, agree to it. Or whatever it is. That this extra condition after extra condition after extra condition was being brought up by the Berkeley administration with respect to her speech and not with respect to any other people's speech. And it was on, supposedly, the grounds that they couldn't secure the event, which is why they wouldn't let the college Republicans or YAF advertise the event in advance. Anyway, their lawyer, Harmeet Dillon, did a good interview. It's about 45 minutes long, but I recommend you watch it all the way through. It's a really good interview from the media and a good press conference. She did great. And she was pointing out that recently the former Mexican president has spoken there. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that a former head of state has security concerns that the ordinary citizen typically doesn't, and that no country can stand by and let one of its former heads of state be abducted. Because even though they're no longer the head of state, terrorists would really, really do well to kidnap a former American president, a former Mexican president, a former head of state of any country. It would cause a lack of stability for that country with respect to dealing with that issue. And because there's just no way, for example, that Americans are going to let a former president be held hostage by anybody else without bombs falling all over the place. I'm sure even in Mexico, they appreciate this fact. What they would do in response is, well, not entirely clear. But the concerns there are obvious to everyone. They had no problem letting President Fox speak on the campus. They had no problem seeing to those security concerns. But Ann Coulter, for some reason, is especially hard to protect. So anyway, the groups on campus decided to file suit for the unlawful actions of the Berkeley administration. They're not living up to their constitutional obligations in respect of their limited public forums that they have set up. That Ann Coulter, just like everyone else, in these groups, just like all the other groups, when they invite a speaker, should be able to do it on equal footing with every other group. So no goofy time, oh, you can only do it in the middle of the day when no one can come to the event. That was one of the options. They said, well, you can schedule the event for a week where no one's going to be on the campus because exams are coming up and there's that dead week where nothing really happens. You can speak then if you'd like when there's no one around. So the lawsuit was filed, and Ann Coulter on Wednesday had mentioned that she had to cancel it because of the conduct of Young America's Foundation in the litigation. She said it became entirely clear that they weren't really interested in the speech. They were interested in having a lawsuit to make noise. Because when they filed the suit, and they did not go for certain kinds of injunctive relief that they should have gone for to enjoin the college to do its job. And she says, and so, like the Berkeley lawyers looked at it and said, oh, they're not serious about this. And she says, and in fact, as it turns out, they weren't actually serious about it. Now, Ben Shapiro has been going around speaking up Young America's Foundation as a good foundation. And maybe it is generally. But the California strain, in particular at Berkeley, seems to be of the cowardly variety. They rescinded the invitation because they weren't going to tolerate any risk to the students at an event, and because it was dangerous, because the school wouldn't do their job apparently, the city of Berkeley wouldn't do its job apparently. It's very strange that this is this is from a group that claims to be wanting the civil rights, and that they're really heavily invested in it, and it's very serious to them, but they're not willing to undergo any risk that someone may be injured. I'm put in mind of the Freedom Riders. Now, these are people who before they went on their rides sat down with attorneys to fill out their last wills and testaments. They were expecting that some of the Freedom Riders would be killed. Certainly that some of them would be injured. Going into the South, as the agitators, and upsetting the apple cart in a place where their particular views weren't welcome.
My phone in the hotel room rings, and it's the Attorney General. And he opens the conversation. Who the hell is Diane Nash? Call her and let her know what is waiting for the Freedom Riders. So I called her. I said, I understand that there are more Freedom Riders coming down from Nashville. You must stop them if you can. Her response was, they're not going to turn back. They're on the way to Birmingham, and they'll be there shortly. You know that spiritual, like a tree standing by the water, I will not be moved. She would not be moved. And I felt my voice go up another decibel and another, and soon I was shouting, young woman, do you understand what you're doing? You're going to get somebody, do you understand you're going to get somebody killed? And there's a pause, and she said, sir, you should know we all signed our last wills and testaments last night before they left. We know someone will be killed, but we cannot let violence overcome nonviolence.
They didn't say, oh my God, we can't do it because it'll be dangerous. They said, you know what, look, this is the right thing to do. Our republic cannot survive without, XYZ kinds of things. People have to stand up and take a stand. When the government is failing, when this agency is failing, when that agency is failing, it falls to the citizens themselves to do the action. And if it entails some death and some injury for these rights, then so be it. The generations that have come before us have shed their blood in their day to secure these rights to those who would come after. So too should we do that. And they went down there, and some of them were beaten, senseless. They had their, while they were on it, they had their bus set on fire. Someone tried to arson them to death. The police would coordinate with local mobs to say, look, we're not going to be there between 1:15 and 1:30, so whatever happens between then, we won't be there to see it. A wink and a nod. That kind of thing. And they went. And they understood that, and this is true of Martin Luther King Jr. and others, but they understood that the press that's going to be generated from the sight of armed people or violent people beating and potentially killing people who are offering no resistance is going to stoke the ire of people all around. No matter how much you disagree with the position, no matter how strongly you dislike someone, or whatever you think they should do it a different way, people have this reaction when they see people who are unarmed and not offering resistance being beaten by people. That really pisses people off. And, the long and the short of the civil rights movement is that they sold the narrative of, non-violent protests. We don't engage in violence. If you look at the pictures, people didn't have guns. Of course, if you zoom out, what you can't help but notice is that towards the end of the civil rights movement, you would have a bevy of police officers, U.S. Marshals in various parts. It could have been the 101st, down in Little Rock. Organs of government doing their job, armed to the teeth. The protesters themselves, however, were taking the risk because they intentionally did not take the means to protect themselves, and they were relying in part on the publicity that would arise from the spectacle of unarmed people being brutally beaten by a mob for having a view that's not popular in certain quarters. Young America's Foundation says we'll have none of that. We can't tolerate anyone potentially getting injured. Now, there are, of course, duties that fall upon the City of Berkeley and the University of Berkeley to provide for the security of the students and guests on the campus and in the city generally. Just like in the South, when the police would do the wink and the nod and go, we're not going to be here for, for a half hour, 15 minutes, whatever it is, so whatever happens during that time, don't be expecting we'll be able to collect any evidence to get any prosecutions. Once these pictures went out the administration of the day had no choice but to act, because it was just really making America look shitty the world over. We're sitting there trying to preach about freedom of democracy, freedom of speech, fundamental human rights, all this, that, and the other, while simultaneously we're having what's happening in the South happening in the South. And so it became very easy for people to go, you talk a good game, American administration. You really, really talk up that Constitution, and you talk up all this liberty, but we can't help but notice your cops are helping beat the stuffing out of some people who are just wanting their rights to be respected. Methinks that you people doth protest a little too much. How about you go fix your own house before you start complaining about how we're running things in our world? It was great for propaganda. And even better, it was all true. So at the time, as that pressure continued to build and continued to build and continued to build, you saw ever more increasing responses by law enforcement to do their job. That would also happen, I think, in Berkeley and on the university and the city at large. And indeed, this week, the police had sent out, let it be known that they were going to be enforcing the no mask rules at these public events, which they should have been doing all along. Now, Harmeet Dillon pointed out in her interview that it violates California law for these people to obscure their faces in that way, and the reason they're doing it is precisely so they can engage in acts of violence without running too substantially high a risk of being identified and prosecuted for their criminal conduct. But as she pointed out, it violates California law. But even if that were not the case, it violates federal law. 18 U.S.C. Section 241, Conspiracy Against Rights, specifically talks about people who it talks about any persons who get together, conspire to intimidate, harass, threaten, assault. There's a whole list of things. People who are exercising or attempting to exercise any of their rights secured to them by the United States Constitution. And then it has a little section there that specifically talks about, and people who go out on the public highways or the public areas, whatever the wording is, in disguise. That's an even worse strain of the already bad conduct. These Antifa people walking around with their little robber masks on, as soon as they show up, the cops should descend on that group and arrest all of them, unmask them, and identify them, and prosecute them for this crime, because their goal there, it's not like they've showed up and they said, oh, we have our handkerchiefs here because in our breast pocket, because later on someone else might do something and pepper spray or tear gas will be thrown, and this is to wipe it off, or to an impromptu breathing aid, or whatever it is. No, they show up wearing it like bandits, precisely to look like bandits, to do what it is they want to do. And Ann Coulter properly notes that her supposed allies, in this instance, tucked their tails between their legs and ran away like cowards. So what I would say to the University, UCal Berkeley folks, is either walk the walk or shut up. Don't go around whining and complaining about how evil this is when you do all of nothing in response to it. You are unlike freedom fighters in the past. You are unwilling to take any risk to see the world be what you claim you want it to be. It's hard to take you seriously when you say this is super important, but you're willing to suffer no consequence, suffer no risk to yourself and your livelihood and your whatever else it is, in order to insist upon these rights. Now, some people will point out quite properly that I'm also not there doing that. You're right, I'm not. But I've served in the military, I've worked in law enforcement, I've been on the front line, I've been in danger to do my bit for the Constitution of the United States and the rights that we enjoy in this country. I was a young man once. I'm no longer young. I'm middle-aged. I'm no longer a young guy. This generation coming about, it's frequently referred to as kids, these college kids. They're not children. They are adults. They need to step up and be adults and accept the responsibility that is being passed to them to secure the rights that my generation enjoyed to themselves and to the generations that come after them. People like me fade away, and it's these new adults who are going to be on the front lines of this, and they need to just accept that you don't fight fascism, you don't fight this strain of society by retreating. You do not retreat to victory unless you're a very good strategist, which these people clearly are not. They're not a George Washington. They're not retreating to save the army. They're retreating to avoid any injury. They want to do a show. It's all flash and bang, no substance. Now, Shapiro's talking about how YAF does generally and how good they've been to him. Maybe there are, and indeed there probably are, certain chapters of YAF that behave differently than the Berkeley chapter did. Their good behavior in the past does not do away with the cowardly, the pusillanimous behavior of the Berkeley group this week. Now, what I would suggest to these organizations at Berkeley is whoever are the people in your organization who are responsible for the decisions, you know, they're the elected leaders or whatever, get rid of them. They are doing you no good. They are undercutting any kind of moral authority that you want to be claiming in these issues. It is hard to take you seriously about how important this is when you run away, run away, run away, run away at every chance. And this isn't running away to get a strategic advantage for a better place to have a pitched battle. It's just running away. It's not a tactical retreat, in other words. And until these people are removed and actual patriots rise up in this organization to take their place, who will not yield in the face of these fascistic bastards, I suggest that people do the exact opposite of what Ben Shapiro recommends that they do. He recommends that people give money, and lots of it, to YAF. I recommend people withhold their funds until YAF starts walking the walk and talking the talk. Alright, that's my thoughts on that. Have a great day.